Hi everyone, it's Jasmine. On today's episode of the Slain Project, I am going to be going over the cases of two young girls who went missing and were found murdered. They are Monica Still Smoking from Montana and Jennifer Wesho from Wisconsin. Now this video is going to go over the abduction and harm of young girls, so if you need to take a break at any time during this video, please feel free to do so. But these stories are really important and they also need to be heard. And if you would like to see more videos on missing and murdered Indigenous people, click that subscribe button and the notification bell. Now let's get right into it. Monica Still Smoking. Monica was born on June 2nd, 1972, to parents Kenny Still Smoking and Mabel Wells. They lived in Browning, Montana on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation. She was a cute little girl who had one green eye, one brown eye, and long dark curly hair. She was also deaf in her left ear. She was 7 years old and attended Napi Elementary School. On December 17, 1979, Monica was let out of class and began a short walk home at about 3 p.m. She was wearing red corduroy pants, a plaid shirt, and a blue and yellow parka jacket with white fur trim. Monica usually walked home, but on this day, a classmate would report that they thought they seen her getting into a car. Her parents did not pick her up, and it is unknown who the individual was that may have been seen picking her up. Montana winters can be pretty cold, and I wonder if Monica accepted a ride from someone she knew or recognized. Her parents were pretty spooked and distraught when Monica did not arrive home. They reported her missing and began to search immediately. Browning is the headquarters of the Blackfeet Nation. The 2020 census declared that the population of Browning was 1,018. So you can assume that back in 1979, it was less than that. Family and friends searched everywhere they could think of, holding out hope that Monica was still alive. Her mom would recall when Monica's boot was found by a hunter, and when the police showed her, she screamed silently in her head, "It's hers, it's hers." I think the discovery of this boot may have led the search party in the right direction. On December 31st, 1979, Monica's uncle would discover her body at about 2 p.m. off of Looking Glass Road. He would describe walking upon her body and her coat was flapping in the wind. This would indicate to me that she was found on her back, coat unzipped. Monica was found on a mountain in Glacier National Park, frozen in the snow. This location was 14 miles west of Browning. Her body was sent to Great Falls, Montana for an autopsy on New Year's Day. The condition of her body or cause of death has not been publicly released, but this is common in investigations by the FBI. The only thing they really said is that her death is linked to exposure. In an article dated January 4th, 1980, the Montana Standard reported that an unnamed FBI spokesman in Butte said that Monica's death is, quote, because of some type of criminal activity, end quote. They went on to say that she was either kidnapped or abandoned on the mountaintop because of the 14-mile distance from where she was last seen. Assuming what we know, I would say she was definitely kidnapped, harmed in whatever way, and left for dead. We can all analyze this and say that it was a criminal act. It's common sense. Monica's case needed more attention at the investigation level at this time, but sadly, she would not get this. The family was desperate for answers. They wanted to know what happened to Monica and who did this to her. It is reported that the FBI only investigated her kidnapping and death for only 3 weeks. Historical news articles seem to confirm this. They stop after January 1980 and begin to pick up again around 2018. Monica's dad, Kenny, said he went to see a medicine man for answers. The medicine man's vision revealed that the man who abducted Monica favored Western clothing and lived in a red house. Nothing ever became of this bit of information. Kenny had no way to follow up on this. Monica's funeral was held at the Browning Evangelical Center. She is buried in St. Michael's Cemetery. As of this recording, it has been 42 years and no one has ever been arrested or charged for the kidnapping and death of Monica still smoking. It is unknown if there is any evidence left in her case. I could not find an answer for this. I would urge Monica's family to ask if the clothing she was found in is still in existence and available for DNA testing. Jennifer Wesho. Jennifer was a 9-year-old girl living with her parents Clifford and Sadie Wesho in Sand Pillow Village, a small community on the Ho-Chunk Nation in Wisconsin. This location is about 5 miles east of Black River Falls. Also included in this story will be Jennifer's uncle Ralph. The Weshos had a get-together at their house on Saturday, August 5th, 1989. There was various family and friends who were invited. What was going on at the get-together was not reported, but seeing as it was summer, I could picture a barbecue in my head. Everything was going good this day until Jennifer left her house at sometime between 10 and 11 a.m. This was the 1980s and kids would go out to play and would be gone for most of the day. This is how it was when I was growing up. We would usually not return home until it was dinner time and we worked up an appetite. So when Jennifer did not return immediately, it did not set off alarm bells until later in the day. Her family waited and probably even looked around the neighborhood for her. She was reported missing at 10 p.m. that same day. The very next day, on Sunday, August 6th, 1989, the family began searching for Jennifer. At about 7:30 a.m., her dad Clifford found his daughter's body in a wooded area 1/4 mile east of their house. It was determined that she had died sometime between 7 and 18 hours before her body was found. Poor Jennifer was found on a red sleeping bag, partially clothed, strangled, beaten, sexually violated, and burned with cigarettes on her face and body. There also was a pillow near her body. Investigators would find foreign hairs in the sleeping bag and on Jennifer's body. They also found beer cans, cigarette butts, and stained clothing. The stains were not specified. It was said that Jennifer was raped, but no semen was found. Maybe this was the cause of the unspecified stains on her clothing. The crime scene was contaminated because family members covered Jennifer's body with their t-shirts when they found her. I know they didn't mean any harm by doing this. They were just trying to respect her body. Investigators would need to sift through the biological evidence later to determine whose DNA did not belong. Upon questioning people at the party, it was discovered that some people seen Jennifer walking away from the house with her Uncle Ralph's friend, Christopher Thundercloud. They said that Christopher was holding a large can of beer. He was interviewed shortly after the discovery of Jennifer's body and a hair sample was taken. Attention soon shifted to a distant cousin of Jennifer's named Dion Funmaker. A couple came forward and said that Dion had gotten drunk and confessed to killing Jennifer. He was arrested on April 3rd, 1991, and was charged with the murder of Jennifer, sexual assault of a child, and felony child abuse. He made statements after his arrest that he had seen Jennifer's body late August 5th or early August 6th. He even marked an approximate location on a map. Investigators also said that Dion never denied killing Jennifer. The charges against Dion were dropped on April 25th, 1991, due to lack of evidence. The couple who came forward about Dion's confession were deemed not credible. Despite this, a cloud of suspicion would continue to follow Dion for the next 20 years. The years ticked by and no one ever came forward with information leading to Jennifer's killer. In late December 2005, Jennifer's mom, Sadie, asked investigators to take another look into her daughter's case. The case had been shelved and there was no movement. In January 2006, there was a meeting held and it was decided that they would test the biological evidence for DNA. Back in 1989, DNA forensic science was in its infancy and was not a tool used in the initial investigation. DNA testing was eventually done a few times and evidence was sent to an FBI lab. These attempts did not produce any results. In 2008, investigators stated that they thought more than one person was responsible for the murder of Jennifer. They wanted to test all the evidence against Dion's DNA. They had to be absolutely sure if he was involved or not. They tested hair samples, beer cans, stained clothing, cigarette butts, and DNA from under Jennifer's fingernails. The truth behind Jennifer's death came to light in April 2011. DNA found on the beer can, on Jennifer's clothing, and scrapings from under her fingernails matched the hair sample taken from Christopher Thundercloud soon after he was first initially interviewed. He was 38 at the time of the murder. He died in September 2006 due to natural causes. Authorities are confident that he is the only person responsible for Jennifer's death. It is unclear why previous DNA testing attempts were unsuccessful. Maybe they were only testing the hairs found on the sleeping bag. But also remember that when Jennifer's body was found, her relatives covered her body with their t-shirts. DNA evidence that led to Christopher as being the murderer did not include the foreign hair sample evidence. Everybody was in shock upon learning who did such a sick and terrible act to 9-year-old Jennifer. Her uncle Ralph was especially shocked. He said he attended Christopher's funeral and mourned his death. What makes me so sick is that he was a trusted family friend. Then he walked around and pretended that nothing happened. It was reported that Christopher lived in a tent near the Weshos at the time Jennifer was murdered. This explains the sleeping bag Jennifer was found with. He also could not account for his time in the 12 hours after Jennifer went missing. Also, I did see it mentioned a couple times that there was a 138-foot drag trail to Jennifer's body. So was she on the sleeping bag and drugged, or was her body drugged and covered with the sleeping bag afterwards? So I am assuming that Chris's tent was not in the same location by the time Jennifer was found, or else they could have just followed the drag trail to his tent. If you stand back and look at the investigation, you can clearly see that the investigators got tunnel vision and were absolutely convinced that Dion had something to do with this. From his arrest in 1991 to news articles in 1999 and 2008, authorities were still convinced Dion was the killer or was involved in some type of way. The La Crosse Tribune reported in an article dated August 9, 1999, that Dion had pled guilty to sexual assault of 2 young girls ages 8 and 9. So I suppose they had good reason to assume that he could have done it. But they also should have looked at the fact that Jennifer was found on a sleeping bag and Christopher was living in a tent. He also was the last person Jennifer was seen with. Jennifer's mother, Sadie, said she forgave the killer even before Christopher was identified as the person who took her daughter away. She could not let a dark cloud of anger follow her around for the rest of her life. Her brother Ralph also followed her lead. Jennifer's family misses her dearly, and are glad that they finally have answers about her death. And that's all I have for you today. If you enjoyed it, please click that like button. And if you have any memories of Monica or Jennifer, please comment down below. And I hope to see you in the next video.